So hi, thank you so much for that kind introduction. Boy, is it nice to be with people in person. Oh my God. Ah, oh my God. And because I'm speaking, I don't have to wear a mask at least for a while, so that's nice. But thank you so much for coming out. Thank all of those. There's a whole group of people online as well. So this is a whole new experiment. Thank you for showing up. Um, many of you know, for me, the KIA is a very familiar space. It's because, as many of you know, my wife, Susan McHenry, is a potter who has taught here for years. And, um, and I want to begin by just saying how much I've learned from her and the KIA community and the many gifted artists that I've come to know by living here for many years. It's quite a community. So the way that our time will be set up, the first third, 35 minutes or so, I'm going to share things. Then we'll have a conversation for 35 minutes or so, and then I'll bring us out with a bookend set of sharings. So our theme this evening is the life of expression. I really want to explore the creative process that's at the heart of all forms and how it keeps us close to life. Creativity is healing all by itself, and that's whether you're creating an amazing piece of sculpture or you're caring for tomatoes in your garden. So I want to start this by sharing two poems of mine and a quote, just as a way to enter this. So the quote is from George Bernard Shaw, that clever, amazing, witty playwright. But this was really wonderful. He said, "You use a mirror to see your face. You use art to see your soul." You use a mirror to see your face. You use art to see your soul. So the first poem I want to share, if you could keep working on that so that, because it's easier if I don't have to hold this forever. Um, the first poem I want to share um, is called Not According to Plan. Appropriate. Yeah, not according to plan, which is just about everything. Um, but I wanted to share this because I think, we are opened to life through the moment at hand and through long learnings over time. So this is from just the moment at hand, not according to plan. When I drop my glasses in the airport and they're crushed in the walkway between terminals, I get to meet the three kind souls who help me on their way. Then I hear you crying after everyone has left. So now I bring you water and hear your story. Ever since the lock on my door broke, I have more visitors. Now the road I always take is detoured, which I curse until I see the heron glide across the small pond I didn't know was there. So the life of expression is healing and ever present when we can stay open. And of course, being human, we don't stay open. We close. My lungs are opening and closing as I speak, my eyes. So it's natural to close, but it's our job to open one more time than we close. And when we do, there's the heron on the pond. So the second piece I want to share really comes from learning over a long period of time, not a moment. And this really comes from a moment of loss and grief. There's been so much loss and grief going on. And it was about, 6 or 7 years ago. And both Susan and I had gone through a lot of losses. We'd lost her mom and my parents. and our beloved dog Mira. And it was a beautiful, beautiful summer day. I was sitting on our back of our house, and all of a sudden I just fell into the well of this grief. But my heart was too exhausted to choose between the beauty of the day and the grief that I couldn't resist. And so it led to this moment called Adrift. Everything is beautiful, and I am so sad. This is how the heart makes a duet of wonder and grief. The light spraying through the lace of the fern is as delicate as the fibers of memory forming their web around the knot in my throat. The breeze makes the birds move from branch to branch as this ache makes me look for those I've lost in the next room, in the next song, in the laugh of the next stranger. In the very center, under it all, what we have that no one can take away and all that we've lost face each other. It is there that I'm adrift, feeling punctured by a holiness that exists inside everything. I am so sad, and everything is beautiful. Now, I share that also as an example of a learning over time versus in a moment, but also as an example of the healing creative process, which has nothing to do with whether a poem is on a page in a book. It's that because I was true to that feeling, that confusion, that I didn't know where it was going, I was rewarded with that insight at the end. I didn't know that when I started the poem. In the very center, under it all, what we have that no one can take away, and all that we've lost face each other. It is there that I'm adrift, feeling punctured by a holiness that exists inside everything. I didn't know that when I started that. That's the reward for staying true to what we feel. That's what the engagement of the creative process, regardless of what we create or whether we call ourselves an artist or not, can open us to. Restoring direct experience is one of the rewards for being open-hearted. And we constantly need to have our direct experience renewed. So what I really want to explore more than anything is this notion that more than what we create, it's how we're created by our involvement, whatever it might be, whether we're aware of it or not. By being fully engaged, we are created. And that's been going on since the beginning of time. So for me, I stumbled into all of this many years ago during my cancer journey in my 30s when I almost died from a rare form of lymphoma, as many of you know. Um, and um, and so everything turned around and upside down. I was a young man in graduate school, and I was hoping to maybe write one or two great poems if I was lucky or if I worked hard enough. And then all of a sudden, I was in the hospital. Well, forget writing great poems. I needed to discover true poems to get me to tomorrow. And now, all these years later, I want to just be the poem. And so I'm always a poet. That's how I see, that's how I meet the world. But it's not about creating anything. It's about the creations. The words are the trail of staying engaged creatively with life. And in a way, we constantly re-inhabit our moment of birth over and over. When we play a song, when we dance, when we are in that kind of moment of conversation where all of a sudden time disappears. We're re-inhabiting that moment of dance. The great Michelangelo, when he would, his theory of creativity, which was maddening to stone sellers, because he believed that the statue was already whole in the uncut stone. And so literally when he would go to choose pieces of marble, which are very heavy and they had to be cut out of the mountain, he'd look at the mountain and they want to give him the next one, and I want that one. Uh, and then he would take it and he would release it by carving the excess away and releasing the statue. Well, this is what life does to us. This is what experience, like it or not, carves the excess away until the statue that we are shows itself. And having watched, been a part of so much of what happens here just by being on the sidelines, the whole anagama kiln process, which many of you here know, but that's the communal firing with the anagama kiln. It's out over on D Avenue, and where everyone works together for long, long periods of time, and it's fired for a week at a time. Well, everyone who works in that knows the fire has the last word. The fire is the creative partner. You don't know what's going to come out. And again, this is another way to understand how we are carved and shaped by life. So one of the things that I want to offer to you is that the creative process, it doesn't really matter what form, the creative process, it helps us do several things. It helps us make life real. It helps us remove everything that gets in the way. And it helps us live. And this is important because what is not expressed is depressed. Almost like a spiritual law of physics. What is not expressed is depressed. So you see, over and again tonight, I'm going to be emphasizing that, the skill and the excellence of what we produce is not as important as the process that reveals our essence. Oh, I write, I want to make sure it's as good as I can make it. But that's not the point. That's kind of a byproduct of giving my soul over to what I'm called to engage in. So drinking from what matters is about staying true and authentic. And it's not about leaving or staying. I want to give you two examples of what I'm talking about. It's staying true. Sometimes, if we're true, we discover that what we're doing leads us to something completely different. Oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And other times, staying true lets us just live into what we've been doing for a long time more deeply. So it's not about staying or going. It's about staying true. So here are two artistic examples. The first is Albert Schweitzer. Now, we all know Albert Schweitzer, the great humanitarian. Well, this is how Albert Schweitzer became Albert Schweitzer. Albert Schweitzer was a teacher of philosophy in a Lutheran school in Germany, very prestigious school. He was already tenured at a young age. And he was also, it happened, a classical organist. And on the weekends or on vacation, he'd be going around Europe to sold out audiences playing the classical organ. So he was quite accomplished at a young age. And then all of a sudden, around the age of 30, he had this vision. He said, I think I'm supposed to create a hospital in Africa. So he talked to some of his friends and his mentors. He said, what do you think? He said, are you nuts? You got it made. You're tenured. You're selling out halls, playing. It must have been what you ate. Forget about it. So he listened to all the people he respected, said thank you, and then he resigned, and at the age of 30 went to medical school and became Albert Schweitzer. So it's not that what he did before was false, it's what he did before prepared him to discover who he was. So a story on the other end, which we go earlier, we go back to the late medieval, early Renaissance. Some of you might have heard of Lorenzo Ghiberti. He was an early Renaissance master, sculptor. And in Florence, there's the Duomo, which is the cathedral, the large cathedral. And there's a little shed, they call them a baptistry, there's a little shed outside, and which was a pretty big building by itself, like 2-3 stories. But he was commissioned to cast the bronze doors of paradise on these doors, that 2 doors that together weighed like 4 tons. And he, if you can see, you can Google it online, there are scenes from the Old Testament, bronze figures in relief, look so real, like they were dipped in bronze and attached to the door. It's considered one of the masterpieces of the Renaissance. It took him 22 years to do it. And when he was about, a third of the way through is when the Renaissance started burgeoning, and all the other artists were saying, hey, Lorenzo, come on, things are happening. Don't you want to come with us? He said, I think I'm good here. I think I'm supposed to do this. So it's not about staying or going, it's about staying true to what's growing within you. How are we doing with that mic? Ah, thank you. All right. Okay. Now, if we can get it on. Oh, it's working. All right. Okay, a little freer. All right. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm not going to dance or anything, but I feel a little freer. Okay. So I want to move here and talk about the nature of expression itself. And the nature of expression, I want to offer it this way, that as we breathe, the way our heart, the way our lungs, you have to inhale and exhale. You don't have a choice. I'm not going to say, oh, let's just exhale while we're here together. You have to breathe. Well, the heart breathes by perceiving and feeling and expressing. That's how the heart inhales and exhales. It doesn't matter what form of expression you use to do that. If you don't do that, you're not going to be fully alive. So it doesn't matter if it's stamp collecting or like Ghiberti, spending 25 years sculpting a bronze door, or gardening. We have to find a personal form of expression so the heart can breathe. So the heart can breathe and you can be as fully alive as possible. So, you take meditation, all the meditation practices. People meditate in order to become a clear vessel, not to become great breathers. And likewise, people become artists to become clear vessels and get closer to life, not to become great artists. We might do great work. We might be considered a great artist for a moment, but we do it to become clear vessels and stay alive. So I want to talk a little bit about, for me anyway, what are some of the primary functions of art, regardless of their form. So there's 4 of them for me. So for this first one, let me share this poem as a way to move into that. And if anything is striking you, just bookmark it for when we have our conversation. This is called Thinking Like a Butterfly. Monday, I was told I was good. I felt relieved. Tuesday, I was ignored. I felt invisible. Wednesday, I was snapped at. I began to doubt myself. On Thursday, I was rejected. Now I was afraid. On Saturday, I was thanked for being me. My soul relaxed. On Sunday, I was left alone till the part of me that can't be influenced grew tired of submitting and resisting. Monday, I was told I was good. By Tuesday, I got off the wheel. Now, did I really get off the wheel? Of course not. So why did I end the poem there? Because I have to have something to aspire to. It wasn't so that you would see me differently than I am. I have to have something to aspire to. And this leads to the first function of art, regardless of its form, and that is to marry what is with what can be. To marry what is with what can be. If we only focus on what can be, we will become idealistic and untethered to life. Pie in the sky. But if we only focus on what is, we're going to be pessimistic and burdened by the grit of life. And both are true. And art helps us bear what is unbearable. That has always been one of its main functions. So the second function, I would say, of art is to bear witness to what is. Now, the great Pablo Neruda, some of you heard of Pablo Neruda, yeah, the great Chilean poet, amazing. And so Neruda wrote a poem in 1936 during the Spanish Civil War. The poem is called I'm Explaining a Few Things, if you're interested. And in there, because he saw horrible things in Spain, and in there he has a line, he has these 2 lines. The blood of the children on the sidewalk is like the blood of children on a sidewalk. Now here, one of the great makers of metaphor in the history of poetry doesn't use a metaphor. He says the blood of the children on the sidewalk is like the blood of children on a sidewalk. And what I think he's saying and instructing there is that in this case, when we bear witness to what is, we don't want any pictures to get in the way. We want the truth to be unfiltered. Sometimes we just need to say what is. There's a great book, the poet Czesław Miłosz, he's a Polish poet, Milosz, wrote a book called The Witness of Poetry, which is an amazing book, The Witness of Poetry. So, of course, on the other side of that, the third function of art is to try to say what is unsayable. I mean, that's really the heart of, the thing out when we're not bearing witness, the things that matter in life
Where are they? Love, truth, wisdom. Where are they? So in a way, it's a beautiful doomed endeavor, because when you're always trying to say what can't be said, but all the great literature of the world is the trail of the attempts. And this is where metaphor starts to come in. Metaphor is a picture of what's hard to keep in view, as we try to keep that in view. And the fourth, so the first is to marry what is with what can be, so that what's unbearable can be made somewhat bearable. The second is to just bear witness to what is. The third function of art is to try to say what's unsayable, and try to keep those two things straight. And the fourth is a social function that art has always played amazingly throughout history, and that's to mirror our patterns, to mirror to society our patterns. It's a great story. Any of you ever remember Mose Allison was a great blues player? Mose Allison? Some people, yeah. So Mose Allison tells this story of a very prominent, well-known educator who was studying the Hopi Native American peoples. And he was studying, and the story is that he went to a Native American elder, a Hopi elder, and he said, who lived out in the desert, the people live in the desert, and he said, why are all your songs about water? And the wise man said, well, because we sing about the thing we have the least of. Oh. And then the Hopi elder looked at the white educator and said, why is all your music about love? So the fourth function is to mirror our patterns back to us. So, I share all this because I want to, as always, those of us who've worked together, it really is only important if you can personalize. How does it speak to you in your life? How do you keep your conversation with the universe going? How does your heart perceive and feel and express? What is your personal form of expression? And how do these things, how are you in your life, not in great society, how are you looking to marry what is with what can be? So you're not rising untethered from life, but you're also not ground down by life. What does that look like for you? How can you bear witness to what is unfiltered so that the truth has a chance? And how can you try to say what is unsayable? Because what's invisible and unsayable, what's essential, this is the river of light. My book is called this book is called Drinking from the River of Light. That's the river of light that feeds our soul. And mirroring not just the patterns to society, but our own patterns to each other so that we can grow. So I want to talk about one more thing here in the next 10 minutes or so and read something that will bring us to a place where we can have our conversation. But I want to talk about our foundational stories and our personal mythologies. So, myth throughout history, and I believe myths start, we go look at the Greek myths, we look at all the different cultures. I think they all started as very specific stories that were designed to keep in view what's hard to keep in view. So it was a story to help us remember, to remember. And then over time, because they were such good stories, all the little details flaked off, and we have the myths. Well, each of us in our lives, we have a host of foundational stories. Some are wonderful, some are difficult, by which we remember what is hard to remember. by which we remember who we are. We often don't think of it that way, and I want to encourage you to think of it that way. I want to encourage you to think about your foundational story so that when you forget who you are, you can tell that story and remember who you are. So you can tell a story and remember where the ground is underneath you. You can tell a story and remember, oh, that's who we are to each other. So I want to give a personal example and share a foundational story for me. I know some of you know this story. It's about my grandmother on my father's side, who was more of a mother to me than my mother. Was a old Russian immigrant, came to America at the turn of the 1900s. I knew her as Grandma Minnie. Her birth name, though, was Majeska. Isn't that beautiful? Majeska. It was anglicized to Minnie. And I know that because in her 90s, when she was in a Kingsbrook Medical Center, and I went go to visit her, and she asked me if I'd go to her apartment in Brooklyn and get some things from her dresser, which I did. And in the back of that top dresser drawer was her steamship ticket that she came to this country with. And on that ticket was this name I didn't know, Majeska. And I brought it to her. I said, "What's this, Grandma?" In her thick Russian accent, she chuckled. She said, "I forgot I ever came." She said, "That's my name, Majeska." So this is about when I was 8 or 9. I'd love to stay with her in Brooklyn. I was with her, and I wandered down into the basement of the Brooklyn apartment and discovered my grandfather, who I'm most like, but he died before I was like 1. But he's the one I'm most like. And I found his prayer book, his Hebrew prayer book. This is called On the Way to Coney Island. I was 8 or 9, rummaging through her basement, through my dead grandfather's books, when she appeared at the foot of the old see-through stairs, nostalgic and moved that I was searching through his things. There were no windows, and the only light came flooding down the length of stairs over her massive shoulders, giving a sheen to her matted gray hair. When I turned, she seemed an immigrant deity. I ran to her with this relic, so worn that the cover was indented with a palm print, the edges crumbling like petrified wood. The book seemed very mysterious. Letters weren't even in English, but strange, beautiful configurations. She almost cried and sat on the bottom steps. I snuggled between her legs against her apron. She gathered me in as she opened the relic and said, "This was your grandfather's prayer book. He brought it from Russia." I remembered running my little hands over it the way I do large stones. Her hands were huge and worked, movable stones themselves. She turned me by my shoulders, and with the light flooding my face, she whispered more firmly than I had ever heard anyone whisper. She said, "You are why we came to this country." She took me by my little chin. She said, "You are why I live." She put the relic in my small hands. I was tentative. She gripped me to it firmly, and my palm slid in the well of my grandfather's touch. She stood on the bottom step, blocking the light, and said, "I love you like life itself." She reached down and sandwiched my little fingers and said, "These are the oldest things you own." As she waddled up the stairs, the light wavered off my face. Without turning, she went back to her kitchen. I stood, and the light settled in the impression of Nehemiah's grip, a man I never knew. And I didn't want to leave this dingy threshold, afraid to climb back into the light. I stood before those stairs, a grimy little innocent, and felt like an orphan who'd been told I was a prince to a kingdom that had perished before I was born. I leafed through the strange letters, watching light make glitter of the dust. I put the book behind a secret shelf, afraid it would crumble if brought into the world, and walked the lighted stairs taller than I had descended. I entered her kitchen, older yet still a child, and climbed her lap like a throne. I went back. I've got that prayer book on my desk. But what Grandma did for me, she was the first one to ever speak to me authentically, soul to soul. I didn't understand everything she said. I was 9. But I knew no one had ever talked to me that way. And she was telling me, I felt it, even as a 9-year-old, that life's going to take you in a lot of places, but you're enough as you are. You don't have to do anything. And I realized over the years that story would come back to me without my looking for it, and it would help me when I refined my way. And then I consciously looked for it and realized it's a foundational story for me. So I invite you, if you're open, to take home with you this question to journal about. Can you tell one story that feels foundational to your life? Can you discuss the lesson this story carries for you, and how does it remind you of who you are? I invite you to take that home with you. So let's pause here and let's have a conversation. Ask all the questions I can't answer, because questions aren't about answers anyway. Yeah, anything that's on your heart or mind. Questions are more like doorways we open to be in relationship. Questions have answers, that is, like, what time are we meeting? At what temperature does water freeze? But questions that pertain to the inner world and the essence of life, they don't have answers. Yeah. Oh, yeah, please. Yeah, you need to hold it kind of close, everybody.
Cool.
Yeah, there we go. Well, maybe, yeah.
I noticed with your first poems, very observational. You start out with an observation and you let your words lead you down that path to discovery. The herring on the pond. Very enlightened, something you didn't expect. My question for you is, do you feel that someone can contrive words to begin that path and still be as surprised at the end?
Yeah, I don't think we contrive. I would, instead of contrive, I think we start, and I encourage, at least for me, we're all comparing notes. So for me, I start with whatever it might be, a strong feeling, a confusion, a hesitation, a complication, a fear, something I don't understand. And then I give my full attention to it. And the words are the trail of that attention. And more often than not, if I'm authentic, true to what is called, whether it's, even if it's an agitation or an anxiety, it leads me to something I don't know. And so I'm surprised by the images or the insights that come. And so that's how the poems become my teachers. And I share that because it's not about writing poems. This is what the introspective process is like, I believe. And that's why it's useful. I just happen to write them down. You don't even have to write them down. But this is, I think, how we stay in conversation with life. So yeah, the question is, what does that look like for you and you and you, for all of us? to find our own way of doing that. Thank you. Yes.
We have a question from our virtual audience. Do you have a set process or time for writing, or do you write as inspiration strikes?
So yes, yes, and yes. So yeah, thank you online for joining in. So, you know, I believe in effort because I never know when grace will show up. So I push the pen until it pulls me. And when it pulls me, then I drop everything. Everything else is just plans until it comes alive. But until it comes alive, there's plenty of work to do. And so for years, Susan can tell you, I'm first thing in the morning, I'm up and in my study for the morning every day. And I used to feel when I was young, oh, am I getting enough done? You know, well, that's not the case anymore. It's more, I need to swim in that stream. Whether I write anything or not that morning, that will take care of itself now. But I need to be in that stream. And that's being in conversation with life. So I do, you know, but if I'm out and about, I'm a lifelong scribbler. Got paper and pen right here. And so that there's always field notes. There's always the unexpected image, the unexpected moment, the detail, the overheard piece of conversation that all of a sudden is the insight to what I'm struggling with. These aren't happenstance. This is how the network of life that we glimpse a moment at a time. Anyone else here? Don't be shy.
I have a friend who is an artist who struggles.
You know, can I ask, because and we're all being wonderful, but when you're asking a question, it's okay to tip your mask down, because
Oh, am I
I
being
have
too
hearing
quiet?
aids, and even with the hearing aids, it's hard.
Thanks for letting me know. So I have a friend who is an artist and who struggles with this artist who uses his art as his main source of income as well. And so he struggles with this idea of wanting to stay authentic to the things he creates and also needing to pay the bills at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
sure.
So I'm wondering if you can speak to that at all. How do you stay true in that context?
Sure. Well, thank you for that. And that's an archetypal struggle that artists in all forms forever have to deal with. And I think for me, I've understood it as every person alive has to both survive and thrive. Often those things don't have anything to do with each other, but over a lifetime, they do. And they may be together for a long time, or they may be apart, and then they'll cross. But I think our job is, how do we stay true to what brings us alive in our soul? That's how we thrive. And if that's in place, it may be frustrating that I can't make a living at that, but then how do I go about surviving? Because if that's in place, I'm okay. It may not be ideal, and I think we all struggle with that. You know, I'm at a point in my life where these are the same, but they weren't always that way. And I had to struggle with that too, you know. But I think that I like to think of it as our souls, our career is our soul's awakening. Where that happens is our occupation, which can change. So that means, and this was something, I have a poem in here, but somewhere along the line, years ago, maybe 20 years ago now, but I would, and nobody taught me to do this, I just started doing it. I would I'd get a list of what needed to be done during the day, and I do all the tedious stuff first. Like if I get that out of the way, then when the deck's cleared, I can do what matters. Oh, you know, like a reward. Well, I had it all backwards. I need to do what matters, what's authentic first, because that changes my eyes, my ears, my heart, my mind, and that makes the rest of it tolerable. I got to do what matters first. And I've been doing that ever since for a long time. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Another virtual audience question. What would you suggest to a person who feels as if they don't have a foundational story?
Well, I would offer to that person to keep listening, because everyone has a story. It may not be the story we want. It may not be a story we like. And sometimes we have to shed the stories we've been told in order to discover the story we're in. So my first suggestion would be to journal about whatever is heartening and see where that leads, because that will reveal a story. Thank you. What else? How you doing? What else is on your heart and mind?
I had a foundational story that led me to the way I am. What happens when the story becomes more of what you were rather than what you are?
Well, that's a great question. I can speak to it. I don't know what, I don't have an answer. But I think, stories are powerful. Stories are powerful. And this whole notion I just mentioned about that often we are burdened by the stories we're given or we're told, that it takes a long time to discover the story, our direct story of life. I was told for many, my parents were both now gone, and they grew up in the Great Depression. They were very skilled, intelligent people, but very literal. Everything was just what you see. They get a mystical poet for a son, right? What do we do with him? But they, anytime I started to bring the things that mattered to me, my story was, my father always used to say that my head was so up in the sky, I would always step in shit. He'd say, "You stupid, look where you're going." I was looking where I was going. I just wasn't looking where he wanted to look. And would you rather fly or have brains? But that's another story. So I just think that, it's hard and it takes time, but I think if we give attention to our own heart, what's true, we can start to separate out. So I was told that all those things didn't matter when I stopped wasting my time. Don't waste your time. My father wanted me to be an architect. My mother wanted me to be a lawyer. Come on, get going. So I had to uncover over years that story to hear my own story. So I do believe that this thing that we're talking about, this notion of authentic expression, helps each of us peel away the stories we've been told so we can hear the story we're in. That might be through journaling, it might be through art, it might be through dialogue with a trusted loved one. I don't know, but that's an important question you raised. Thank you.
Do you have a person, maybe Susan or other people that you show your work to as you're working on it? Or do you...
So uh, I do, but however, I don't show work that I'm working on until, I like to say, I've retrieved it fully. Because this space we're talking about, this authentic conversation with life, it's the one place I have where I get to hold nothing back, not worry about anybody else's opinion or what anybody would think, even when I'm wrong. And so I need to devote myself wholeheartedly to that. Once it's there, then, oh, I want to share it. I want to, what do you think? Did I even approach what I was trying to say? Not so much is it good, but more, did it capture what I am trying to reach for? Or how does that, and what does it open up for you? So I do have people, and so all the books that I've written, with the exception, interestingly, of the Book of Awakening, every book, I've never shared it with an editor until it was completely done, as a whole. Doesn't mean I wouldn't, then I would go back and take suggestions, consider things, but I wouldn't give it or even let it out of the house, because being a sensitive person, and we're all sensitive, otherwise we wouldn't be here, I can't always filter out the influence of others. So when I'm in that creative space, I need to be able to do that. Francesco Goya, the great Spanish painter, he went deaf in midlife. And after he was deaf, he felt like he had more direct contact with his creative powers. And he said in a letter, he said, because going deaf allowed me to give up the aim to please others. Amazing. So we need to negotiate that, each of us.
Another virtual question. Thinking of your poem, Discernment, do you have any insight on how we can discern when we're being truly open to life and experience, or caging ourselves in the name of boundaries?
Or what was the second part? Or
caging ourselves in the name of boundaries.
Well, I think that the only way that we can know, it's an inside job. I think we can fool ourselves, and that's why I try for myself, and I emphasize so much this mysterious thing, this force of being authentic, because when I'm authentic, I know what's real. I may not understand it. I may not know where I'm going, remember David Byrne from the Talking Heads said, I'm not lost, I just don't know where I am. So, but we know what's true. And like stepping stones across the stream, when we step on one, oh, there's the next one. Oh, there's the next one. And so I think that's the way that we have to make our way forward. And we can unravel ourselves. We can unravel our own uncertainty, with uncertainty, what we know to be true. This is the great lesson of Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet. We're so used to it, we take it for granted. Hamlet is this precocious, amazing young man, talented, sensitive, gifted, insightful. And he comes home one day to find not only did his mother sleep with his uncle, that they both killed his father. All right, just take that in. That'd be a whole season on Law and Order. And he knows what happened. And he knows in his heart he has to do something. And Hamlet is the cautionary tale that every time he approaches what he knows is true, he starts to unravel it. He says, yeah, but what if? And how do I know? And maybe I don't know. And repeatedly, he just undoes his own will. That's the tragedy of Hamlet. Not whether he brought them to justice, but the fact that his own truth and being was unraveled by his mind. And that's a cautionary tale for all of us. So, yeah, we can ask, how do I know if this is true or not? But you know, when if you put your hand in the water, you don't have to ask if it's wet. And I'm not being flip about that, but for each of us, there are certain touchstone daily experiences that we don't have to question. We know they're real. We may not know what they mean. We may not know where they're taking us. We may not even like that they're true, but we know in our heart what's true. And if we stay with that, at least for me, in my life, it has been a teacher. One true thing has led to the next true thing. Well, thank you for that. And you know, other things. Well, let me move us into our second part there. Thank you for those questions and for your feelings and thoughts. So I want to in this second part look more closely at how we grow. How we grow. So I want to start with a piece, which is a couple of paragraphs. It's from my book, As Far as the Heart Can See, which is a book of teaching stories and parables. But this is just a little bit of my own journey of growing over the years. When I was starting out, I wanted so badly to become a poet that I held it in view like some hill I needed to climb to see from. But getting to the top, something was missing, and so I had to climb to the next hill. Finally, I realized I didn't need to climb to become a poet. I already was a poet. The same thing happened with love. I wanted so badly to love and be loved, but climbing through relationships like hills, I realized again that I was loving and loved all along already. Then I wanted to become wise. But after much travel and study, it was during my bedridden days with cancer that I realized I already was wise. I just didn't know the language of my own wisdom. Now I can see that all these incarnations come alive when we dare to live the days before us. We carry the love and wisdom like seeds if we can water them. Another lesson is more recent. It comes from a conversation I had with a very wise woman who was a mentor to me. And this was the Jungiest Helen Luke. I've mentioned Helen Luke right here from Three Rivers. She's gone now quite a while. But Helen was a mentor to me. I knew Helen during the last 2 years of her life. And during what turned out to be our last conversation, she said to me, she looked over her glasses, she was British, firm but gentle inside, and always pointed her finger. She looked at me over her glasses and said, yours is to live it, not to reveal it. Well, this troubled me, for I've spent much of my life thinking my job has been just that, to reveal what is essential and hidden. But in the years since Helen died, I've come to understand her last instruction as an invitation to shed any grand purpose, no matter how devoted we may be to it. She wasn't telling me to stop writing, but to stop striving to be important. She was inviting me to stop recording the poetry of life and to enter the poetry of life. And I say to you now, this applies to us all. If we devote ourselves to the life at hand, the rest will follow. For life reveals itself to those willing to live. It's a profoundly simple statement. Anything else, no matter how beautiful, is just advertising. It took me many years to learn and accept Having begun innocently enough, there arose separations, and now I know that health resides in restoring direct experience. So having struggled to do what has never been done, I have discovered that living is the original art. And that's really what we're exploring tonight. Living is the original art. And whatever means, form that you're drawn to, great. Doesn't really matter. So some of the things I've learned along the way, one is I would offer to you that poetry is the unexpected utterance of the soul. It's not stanzas. It's not form. It doesn't matter if it's in lines or in a paragraph or even in a book. Poetry is the unexpected utterance of the soul. It's the moment that surprisingly where everything touches everything else. And obviously we can't plan that moment. We can't will it. That's why it's all discovery. But we can work toward being an open vessel. That's why the heart has to perceive and feel and express so that it stays open and clear, so that when that moment shows up, we're not clogged. The way the heart, we all know the heart can have plaque, and we all take cholesterol medicine, right? So, but the emotional heart, the spiritual heart, assumptions and conclusions are the plaque that clogs the emotional heart, the spiritual heart. And we need to clear out our assumptions and conclusions regularly so that we don't weaken our spiritual heart. And all the things we're talking about is the medicine to do that. Can't take a pill for that. But we can hold nothing back, try to be truthful, try to discover the story we're in, not the one we've been told, and bear witness to what is, try to say what's unsayable, marry what is with what can be, so life can be bearable out here, so we can survive, so that we can thrive. So all of this is to say, whatever form for me over the years, it is a matter of discovery, not invention. I relate to material, I don't manipulate it. I try to make sure it's as clear as possible, but I'm relating to it. And that's where I said, I retrieve, I feel, more than author. So all of this, invites us to keep looking. The commitment to keep looking. So I want to tell two little stories about that. The effort to keep looking more than once. So the first story, and first let me say that the word respect means literally to look again. Spect means look, respect means look again. Inspect means look in, really. We've kind of made it mean something else in the world. But inspect means to look in. So when you keep looking, you're respecting yourself. When you keep looking, you're respecting yourself. So the first story is of Henri Matisse, wonderful painter. Now Matisse was very influenced, an older painter, Delacroix. And Delacroix had painted in Morocco some paintings, and Matisse was just enamored with them. And so he saved his money. He went from France, stayed in the same estate where Delacroix, and for about 6 weeks, he painted 3 paintings. And then he was very excited, exhilarated, pleased, got the paintings, went home. And about a year later, he's looking at one of them. The painting is called Acanthus, A-C-A-N-T-H-U-S, Acanthus. And he goes, I don't know if I got it right. Now it's framed. So he takes the frame painting, gets on a train, and he goes back to Morocco. And he goes back to where he painted it, the same villa. He puts it up, and he goes, I got it right. And he went home. I don't think that that's a story of being obsessive or compulsive. It's about looking again. It's about keep looking. Keep looking. Another story along those lines is a wonderful story about E.E. Cummings. E.E. Cummings, a wonderful poet, lived in the Village in New York City. And every day he'd come up in they had a little brownstone, and his wife, Marion, and they'd have breakfast. He'd go down to study, and he'd come up, she'd call him for lunch. So this day they went down, he had breakfast, he's down working, and she calls him for lunch. And as he's coming up from the basement where his study was, she sees a big smile on his face. She said, well, you look like you had a great morning. He said, oh, I did. Well, what happened? He said, well, just after we had breakfast, I took a comma out. And just now, before you called me, I put it back in. This is not about perfection. Neither of these stories is about obsession or perfection. It's about continuing to look. Because looking is not a static act. Just as our understanding evolves, our seeing evolves. So we have to respect ourselves and have a commitment to keep looking. To keep looking. So, another take-home question for you, if you're interested to journal about. Can you describe something in your life or work that's calling you to look again? Can you describe something in your life that's calling you to look again? What is it asking of you? All of life reaches us through this chord in our heart. And so there are two things among many that help us. One, and we each have to develop a practice in this, one is patience, very hard, and the other is holding nothing back. So I want to offer a quote about each. The first is it's actually an old anonymous Zen story in 2 sentences. Whole short story in 2 sentences. Why is the road to freedom so long? Asked the troubled apprentice. And the master replied, because it has to go through you. Why is the road to freedom so long? Asked the troubled apprentice. And the master replied, because it has to go through you. When I first heard that years ago, I thought it was a critical response. But having lived a lot longer, I think it's a geographical response. I think the terrain of the self is that big. It takes long because it has to go through us, like it has to cross the continental United States or go halfway around the world. It takes time. No matter how quick technology, we're online. I'm grateful for you to be online with us. Things that matter take time. Take time. The second, this is one of the conundrums of paradoxes of being human. We are horribly impatient. That's the human in us. But our soul is infinitely patient. And we'll say, have you learned this yet? Well, go take your time. Go ahead. Wander. I'll actually wait longer than your life. How's that? I'll wait and visit someone else. Go ahead, take your time. So we're impatient. but our soul is very patient. So how do we develop while honoring that we're impatient, that's our limitation, how do we still develop a practice of patience? So the second thing about holding nothing back, because that leads us to wholehearted engagement. And for this, I want to share a quote from Dag Hammarskjöld. Anybody remember Dag Hammarskjöld? A few people. Dag Hammarskjöld was the second Secretary General of the United Nations who died in a plane crash in 1961. And he had a wonderful, was quite a deep, remarkable man. And he, actually, John F. Kennedy called him the statesman of the century, as the respect John F. Kennedy had for him. But he had a journal that was called Markings. That's it, like his inner diary. And it was discovered in the plane crash. And it's a little hard to find, but you can still find it. But this is the quote that I want to share with you about holding nothing back. Dag Hammarskjöld, I don't know who or what put the question. I don't know when it was put. I don't even remember answering, but at some moment I did answer yes to someone or something. And from that hour, I was certain that existence is meaningful and that my life in self-surrender has a goal. I don't know who or what put the question. I don't know when it was put. I don't even remember answering, but at some moment I did answer yes to someone or something. And from that hour, I was certain that existence is meaningful and that my life in self-surrender has a goal. And what's so beautiful about that is he's saying yes. He doesn't even know what he's saying yes to. But this gets back to the notion that we know what's true. At a certain fundamental level, we know what is true in our experience. So one more question here for you to take home with you if you're willing, if you're interested. And that is, can you describe what a personal practice of patience would look like for you? Can you describe what a practice of saying yes to life would look like for you? What would it look like if you're patient? What would it look like if you were to say yes to life? So, one of the things, my father, who I mentioned, I learned a lot from him, both negatively and positively, and probably like most parents. But one thing, and this was, he, and I'm sure I got some gifts from this, but if I heard it once, I heard it, oh my God, thousands of times growing up. I don't care how hard you try, show me what you accomplished. You just say that to me, no matter what. I wanted him to be proud of me. If I was struggling with something, I don't care how hard you try to show me what you accomplished. And I'm sure that has given me some skills, but actually, I'm 70, and I think the opposite is true. Regardless of what you accomplish, show me how hard you try. That's really what matters to me. Because that wholehearted engagement is what leads us to our natural gift. There was a female mystic. I say that because very few mystics in the Middle Ages were acknowledged as female. A female mystic, Mechthild, German, Mechthild. And she said this beautiful thing. She said, a fish does not drown in water, and a bird does not fall from the sky. Each creature must find their own God-given element. A fish doesn't drown in water, a bird does not fall from the sky. Each creature must find their God-given element. Well, for birds and fish, it's pretty simple, but not for us. We are such complex, many gifted, incredible beings with all this consciousness, and we could do almost anything. So the first task, by being wholehearted, which is why it matters how hard you try, to discover our own element. What is the water in which we naturally swim? What is the sky in which we naturally fly? So that leads us to the effort to what is true, not great. So I only have a few more things to share with you tonight, a couple of thoughts and a couple of stories, and then we're going to close with a poem. But the one thing I do want to share, which is, this is at the crux of surviving and thriving, and it's heightened with artists, but it's really in everything, is, the difference between giving attention and getting attention. In the outer world, we're taught to get ahead, you got to get attention. Got to turn in a resume, got to have it look good, I got to make good on an interview. That's all real, that's true. But to thrive and be fully alive, you need to give attention. And it's very understandable to mix those up. And then we start thinking, if we get attention, I'll feel worthy. Now I can't get enough attention. Now I want to be on American Voice or whatever it is. So now I want to be a celebrity when I'm aching for something to celebrate. So to get ahead, we need to get attention, but to get a heart, you need to give attention. So again, like other things we talked about, we're the ones who have to keep these things clear. When I started writing as a young boy, it was really to keep wonder in view a little longer. I saw something and I go, wow. And then it was gone. Oh, wait a minute. I hardly saw, wait, where are you going? And I said, well, maybe if I could draw a word picture, it would stay longer. So what kept me alive and kept me going was recognizing and verifying everything I saw. And here we are driven in the outer world to be recognized and verified. Tell me I'm okay. Tell me I'm enough. Tell me I'm great. Tell me I've done something no one's ever done before. And like any addiction, it's never enough. Because our worth comes from our direct connection with life. Not this way, this way. Which goes back to the whole point of our conversation tonight. Is what's the personal form of expression that helps you maintain your direct connection with life? So let me share one more story and one more poem, and then we'll call it an evening. So the story also is from my grandmother, who I mentioned, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Grandma Minnie. So this also comes from towards the end of her life. She was in this, it was before formal assisted living. She was just kind of in a wing of Kingsbrook Medical Center in Brooklyn, because they didn't know yet that would be assisted living. So they were just kind of, they're still living, what do we do with them? So she was there, she was 94, and I would go to see her when I could. I didn't live real close. And I came in, it was a beautiful May day, beautiful day. And I came in and I happened, I came in the room, she'd been in this one room for 6 months. Came in this room, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, and I saw her before she saw me. And she looked glum, she looked, And I came in and said, Grandma, and then she perked up and I said, what's the matter? And she said in her thick Russian accent, it's a gray day. It was a beautiful day. So now, my parents had said, well, she's 94, she's might be losing it, beware. But I looked around and she had one window in this small room, and the window had never been cleaned. It was filthy. So it was a gray day for her because the light wasn't getting in. I said, Grandma, the window's dirty. I'll get it clean. It's a beautiful day. Let's go out. I'll bring you out in the courtyard. And she looked at me and she looked at the window. And as only someone almost 100 years old who came across an ocean to be in this other country, she looked at me and she chuckled and she said, got a dirty eye, see a dirty world. Got a dirty eye, see a dirty world. I count that as immigrant wisdom. There will be gray days, but before we put all our effort into meeting a gray day, let's clean the window. Clean the window first. And this is also one of the chief functions of art. Whatever form it takes, the life of expression. Your personal form of expression helps clean the window of your eye, the window of your mind, the window of your heart, the window of your ears. And then you can decide if it really is a gray day or not. We call this cleaning the window introspection. And there are 1,000 ways to participate in it. From refinishing furniture, to meditating, to building boats, to gardening, to making beautiful sculptures, pottery, to writing poems, to listening to the stories of others. But these are the personal practices that we need if we are to be fully here. So, let me share. Thank you so much. This has been a joy to be with you, to explore this way. And let me close, and I'll be happy, I'll be out there or sign some books if you want afterwards. But let me share with you a new piece, just a paragraph, kind of a prose poem, called The Love of Everything, and we'll close with that. The love of everything. After more than 70 years, I confess that even when struggling, even when lost, I have never stopped loving everything. And this has enabled me to inhabit life authentically. In the beginning, there were goals I was taught to work toward, and these longings for worth were honed in time into personal ambitions, which have all fallen away. For staying true to the love of everything as our teacher has turned out to be the most enduring ambition of all. This love has made me get up when I have fallen and has given me the strength to enter the breaks in my heart where I have retrieved my gifts. And so I have very little to offer beyond the affirmation that unending love without preference will lead us to drink from the mystery without leaving the world. Unending love without intent will fill every contour of existence the way light fills every hole. So there is very little to teach, just that love awakens everything and care erases the walls we keep building between us.